and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Hello and welcome to Open, the one and only show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world right to you. I'm your host, Ramon Rodriguez, in for Darren Jaime, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our community, as well as around the world. Coming up on today's show, we'll bring you the latest headlines in local, national, and international news. After that, in our legal corner, we'll take a closer look at equal protection of the law and the Supreme Court decisions. Plus, political analyst Mark Meyerowitz joins us to discuss all the latest in the world of politics in our community and around the world. And summer has officially kicked off, and we'll get tips on how you can stay safe and have fun. And later on, we sit down with an organization transforming lives through quality, affordable housing. So stay tuned. All this and much more is headed your way because we are now officially open. Hello again, everyone. I'm your host, Ramon Rodriguez, in for Darren Jaime. Today is Wednesday, June 26, 2013. And of course, you are watching Open, the only live and interactive program that brings the Bronx and New York City straight to your TV set. We want to encourage you to stay connected to us, so you can find us on Twitter at BronxNet TV and on Facebook at Open BronxNet Television. Leading things off with national news, Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act was officially struck down by the Supreme Court on Tuesday. The Voting Rights Act would call for non-discriminatory actions towards specific groups. The Supreme Court found that Congress did not provide adequate justification for giving 9 states federal oversights. On the international front, Russia's foreign minister has rejected United States demands to transfer the alleged national security leaker Edward Snowden. According to Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov, Snowden never crossed the Russian border. Lavrov believes that accusations that Snowden violated United States laws are absolutely ungrounded and unacceptable. And locally, dozens of Bronx parents gathered at the Department of Education headquarters this week in an effort to keep funding at Public School 64 intact in the Mount Eden section. While the Department of Education has already decided the school will begin a phase-out process starting in the fall of 2013, parents do not want the remaining students to suffer due to lack of funding. According to the Daily News, the Department of Education has not given a statement on this issue, but made it clear that the school will be closing due to a low proficiency rate in English and mathematics amongst the student body. Those are the headlines we have to talk about today, and we'll take a quick break and return to our show in a few moments. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey, how's it going?
Sir, are you okay?
What? Oh, this? It's probably nothing. I'm sure it'll go away.
Go away? But, sir, that can't be good.
No, it's cool. Really.
Do you want a napkin?
1, 2, 3.
Everything's
4,
fine.
5.
Thanks.
6.
You wouldn't ignore this.
7.
So why ignore the
8,
signs of a stroke?
9.
At the first warning signs, call 911 immediately. Because time lost is brain lost.
Hello, I'm Donja Lemon from Open 2.0 on BronxNet, the show by teens, for teens, and about teens. Catch us every Friday at 4:30 and anytime on the web by going to www.bronxnet.org.
Sir, are you okay?
Everything's fine. Thanks.
You wouldn't ignore this. So why ignore the signs of a stroke? Call 911 immediately. Because time lost is brain lost.
Separate raw meats from other foods by using different cutting boards. 3,000 Americans will die from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
This is so cool, Dad. Awesome. This is so cool, Dad.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of siblings in foster care who'll take you just as you are.
G-Morning, sunshine. Wakey, wakey. Text me. Are your parents home later? We can hang. LUV, love you. JK. Holla back. Holla back. Holla back. Are you with your friends? That's lame. We're in a huge fight right now. XO. What'd you dream about? Something I did. Are you on your way to the mall? I'm lonely. Nude pics. Send me some. Text me.
Hello and welcome back to Open. I'm your host, Ramon Rodriguez, in today for Darren Jaime. In our legal corner today, we will learn about the law and how to defend ourselves under the Constitution. With us today to understand our rights is attorney and legal correspondent David Lesh. David, thank you for being with us, and it's nice to see you again.
My pleasure. It's an exciting time for me, to be honest. It's an exciting time to be a lawyer. You know, these cases are all coming down in the same week. I can't remember in the last 25 years since I've been an attorney that I've had a week to look at these types of decisions and just feel very proud that the Supreme Court is coming down and really shaping society through its interpretation of law. But it really starts with the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. It's going to read the last part of it, which really states, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. The Equal Protection Clause, and that's what these cases are really about. Was somebody denied equal protection by the state? And the Equal Protection Clause has now been expanded to, has the federal government also deprived you the right that it's giving other citizens? And there are three major cases, really four, but three. I can only talk about two of them because one of them has not come down yet.
Yeah.
I can talk about the Affirmative Action, and I could talk about the Voting Rights Act. I can't talk yet about the Defense of Marriage Act, Proposition 8. I can't talk about that yet because I don't know what the decision is going to be.
But before you talk about any of them, I do have to, I smile a little because I certainly understand the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause. And in terms of the denial of rights to the citizens of this country that are equally protected. But of course, the issue here with the Voting Rights Act and the section that was struck down, the courts seem to have stated that basically that for lack of a better description, the methodology that Congress used to determine whether or not these individuals and the affected individuals should continue to be protected by that Section 4, giving them that equal right to vote, which they had not had before.
Well, look, the Supreme Court had let it be known 4 years ago that if Congress wasn't going to go take a look at the Voting Rights Act and change the way the way data was accumulated to see whether these states were still in violation or still needed to be in strict compliance, they were going to strike it down. They gave the warning, and Congress didn't do anything for 4 years. And to be honest with you, it's been almost 50 years since those states, those 9 and a few others, were deemed to need some strict scrutiny as to what they should or should not do in terms of, redistricting or voter identification. And look, the Supreme Court's not saying that the federal government shouldn't have the right to look at these different states and to make sure that they comply, or certain states. That's what the federal government is there to do, to protect its citizens and to make sure that everyone has an equal say in their ability to vote.
But the problem, David, with this is, as I see it, and as I have read that many others see it, scholars much more scholarly than I, feel that the Supreme Court's decision really has taken, at a minimum, a position now where it's going to put the progress that was made over the last 40 years or so under that Voting Rights Act, it's going to put it at a standstill at a minimum, if not, in fact, start to regress to what that Voting Rights what that Voting Rights Act was intended to correct.
Look, a lot has changed in the 50 years since the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. It's really not fair. I mean, if I have to wear the other hat, it's really not fair for some of those states to contact the federal government every single time they want to redistrict or do something with voter ID when so much time has passed and we have an African American president and so many different things have changed now. For these states to be singled out without any data showing that those states are still not really in compliance or should be looked at with strict scrutiny, I can understand why the Supreme Court is saying, look, accumulate some more data and tell us what's been going on there, and we'll decide whether or not we should make them conform the way the northern states and some other states may have to do it. We're gonna still continue to have strict scrutiny. I can understand how we just want to see what's been going on. It's been 50 years. You haven't showed us anything else. Things have changed.
But how much more do we want to see about what's going on than the lines that occurred for the presidential general election in 2012 in states like Florida, in states like Pennsylvania, that fortunately that was struck down before the election, the laws that they tried to change there in terms of the requirements for people of the identification that they had to produce, and that affected seniors, it affected people of color, it affected students.
But Ron, that's happening throughout the country. It's not just happening in those 9 states in the South and the 3 others. It's happening all over the United States. So why are we making those 9 states in the South, why are we still really punishing them for what happened back in 1965? That's what it comes down to. But by the way, the equal protection of law, and I know Mark is going to be on, the political analyst is going to talk a little bit more about the Voting Rights Act. But, talking about affirmative action also, look, everybody wants to be treated equally. The young lady who wanted to become a student at the University of Texas in Austin wanted to be treated equally. Look, I wasn't in the top 10% of my class. I just missed the cutoff, but there were spots, other spots. But you're not taking me. You're taking minorities from the area, and that's not fair to me. I did better than those students did in school. Why are you not taking me? The equal protection. Well, here was a situation where, yes, the Supreme Court said, no, we're going to uphold affirmative action. We're not going to say so much of it was a victory as affirmative action as it is as an averting of disaster is really what this is. So now we're going to send it back to the federal court. Let the federal court take a look and make sure that this college, this university, and any other university, if you're going to put forth affirmative action, take an affirmative step. Again, affirmative step to make sure that you integrate your school, diversify for the better of the community. You better make sure that there's a means to an end here. How are you getting these students? Where are you from? What neighborhoods? How are you going to integrate them into your school? What kind of classes are you going to use for the diversification? Show us the plan that you have, how it's going to work, that it's going to be successful. If you're not going to show us that, then no, then we're not going to allow that.
And just got word that there is breaking news.
Okay, let's hear it.
The Supreme Court has struck down the Defense of Marriage Act that was enacted during the Clinton
Which
administration.
just shows you that the federal government has to now provide equal protection to those of the state that allow gay marriage. Federal law requires that now.
Well, that's going to be the other decision that we're waiting for.
Right. So it's the equal protection clause is so important. And if I was somebody in a state and I was married, gay marriage, and my state recognized it, but now the federal government through this act says no, we're not going to recognize it, I'd be angry. And now the court just struck it down. So that's 3. What a week! It's been just an incredible week in the law.
Well, as you said, it was good to see that they did not strike down the affirmative action, case completely, and just gave the federal courts at the
but that's where it's going, by the way.
Well,
it's heading in that direction.
Unless, of course, as you indicated, the states can support their activity as far as
not going to be easy to do.
Well, it's not going to be easy, but nothing that I think that lends itself to affording equal opportunity and equal rights.
And just
to
lastly,
all
very
would
quickly,
be
remember
easy.
Justice O'Connor, when she affirmed for the affirmative action decision back in the 2003, I believe, she wrote for the majority, basically said, look, in 25 years, we're not going to need it anymore.
That was the Michigan
Right,
case, wasn't it?
you're not going to need it. We're getting close. We're slowly going to cut away at it.
Well,
And hopefully we won't need it. It'd be nice if we don't need it.
It would be nice. It would be nice if there weren't the kinds of activities that occur in this country as against certain groups of people at certain times in certain places. That would also be nice. But to that end is why I think that a radical, elimination of some of the protection that some of the negatively impacted groups have endured over an extended period of time.
I agree.
Is
I agree, but
something
remember,
that has to be done
constitutional
very
law is always a
carefully.
balance. There's always somebody on the other side. And that's what the whole equal protection of the law clause is supposed to protect. Someone who's on the other side of the scale. There's always going to be somebody on the other side.
Absolutely.
And that's why we have these decisions, and that's
Absolutely.
why we're so lucky to live in this country.
And let's see, so we talked about the Supreme Court decisions. We just got the breaking news on the DOMA, which is going to be interesting, really interesting to see how that's going to impact, because it's got a lot of financial
Well,
impact.
just think about the tax purposes when you file as a
By the way,
married, the
but-
deductions that you get as a married couple that the federal government and the IRS has to recognize.
Sure,
Think
sure.
of the money
Sure.
that you, in some respects, that you lose as a country for tax purposes, but you will get as a couple. Yeah, huge ramifications, so many ramifications, disability, wherever you're going to be applying because your spouse, declarative spouse, has privileges, you can then declare under that particular section of wherever you are, insurance, whatever it is.
No doubt, no doubt. By the
That's
way,
huge.
there was a 5-4 vote. So
Wow.
it.
I always like reading the dissent.
Yeah. Well, the dissent, I can just anticipate who
a little more exciting.
who falls into that dissenting
Right.
group.
We'll see who
But
might
but I'll
win it.
I'll reserve that.
And maybe somebody else can speak about the decision
Yeah,
later on.
yeah.
But I obviously don't know enough about it.
No, but it is going to be it's going to be interesting, and it's going to. I wonder whether or not they'll come down on the same side in terms of just recognizing the marriage of same-sex couples.
Again, we're heading in that direction also. The law, it takes time.
Yeah.
It's steps. It never
It's
goes.
an evolutionary process.
Yes, it never goes. I mean, with Roe v. Wade, that was different. That went 0 to 60. We got that decision. We went in a certain way.
And
but
speaking of which, do you see that down the pike at any time being reversed?
no, we've come too far with a woman's right to have an abortion for that to be completely cut. But there will be, parts of it.
Challenges, for sure, yeah.
How long, how far away, how far off the woman is in terms of the pregnancy. That might be,
Okay.
But no,
Well-
I think a woman will always have the right to have an abortion in this country.
Well, let's see how that develops. David, as always,
My
thank you for
pleasure.
being with us and giving us your insight, and I love the give and take.
Anytime.
Thank you so much. And we have to take a quick break now, but when we return, we'll get the latest in the world of politics. We'll be right back.
Gotta get that. Oh, it must be careful there. Well, that's a nice picture.
Come on, Anna.
Okay.
Foreclosure doesn't affect just you. It affects your whole family, too. If you've fallen behind on your mortgage, we can help. Call 1-888-995-HOPE because nothing is worse than doing nothing.
Megan, you're a tramp. Ryan Fitch told me you guys made out. Everybody knows. He says you're the most desperate girl he knows, besides your mom. How many boyfriends does she have anyway? Lots? That zit is huge. Zit face. Ugly.
I love being in classrooms like this one and learning new things. But I'm a Brooklyn girl, and I know school can be hard. It's demanding, and we kids have many distractions, lots of other things we could be doing. Sometimes even your friends may tell you that school isn't cool, that it isn't the place to be. Don't listen to them. There's nothing more important than education. It's the key to everything else. It helps us understand our world and be better people, better friends, and better citizens. So stay in school, and don't let anyone tell you that you're not good enough or smart enough. Be a star, shine brighter than anyone else, and you'll make the grade.
This has been a public service announcement of the Make the Grade Foundation. Go to makethegrade.org to learn more.
G-morning, sunshine. Wakey, wakey. Text me. Are your parents home later? We can hang. LUV, love you. JK. Holla back. Holla back. Holla back. Are you with your friends? That's lame. We're in a huge fight right now. XO. What'd you dream about? Something I did. Are you on your way to the mall? I'm lonely. Nude pics. Send me some. Text me.
Hello, viewers. I'm your host, Ramon Rodriguez, and our next guest is political analyst and SUNY Maritime professor Mark Meyerowitz. He's here to keep us up to date with the most recent stories, both nationally and internationally, and of course with the breaking news of the Supreme Court decision on the Defense of Marriage Act. And Mark, welcome to the show. It's always nice to see you.
Great to be here. Very exciting day.
Yes, it is. As David indicated, it has been a kind of a real landslide in terms of what has happened
Well,
legally.
I'm a lawyer myself, and it's very exciting to look at. I teach constitutional law also at SUNY Maritime College. And
so on that note,
yep.
Take us right into the
Well,
Defense
as
of
we
Marriage
sit
Act.
right now, as we sit at this moment, the Supreme Court convened at 10 o'clock. Oyez, oyez, oyez. I don't know if any of you have been at the Supreme Court. It's very exciting. The judges come in, and they start reading. And right now, they just, as you said, struck down the DOMA law, which means that the federal government cannot discriminate against lawfully married same-sex couples.
And describe that.
Well, that
Lawfully
means
married
a
versus
number
civil
of the
union.
states, a number of the states have approved same-sex marriage.
About
now,
11
now
or so.
we don't know, 11 and some pending.
Right.
And D.C. has also approved it as well. Right now, there's another case pending on Prop 8, which is the whole question of whether same-sex marriage itself is valid or not valid. Now, I should point out that in the DOMA, as you stated in your segment, DOMA was struck down. That law was a federal law that said you can only get federal benefits as a married person if you're a man and a woman. That is gone now. So basically, if you're lawfully married in the United States under the law of the state, because generally marriage is the creature of the state law, you can't be discriminated against, just as this gay couple was, because there were two women married to each other lawfully, and then the IRS came and said, pay me taxes. And they said, wait a minute, I married. Yeah, over $300,000. Prop 8 is the situation in California, which is whether or not you can actually deprive people of the right of same-sex marriage. Same-sex marriage was struck down. Now, I wanted to mention that the dissenters, it was 5-4, as you said before, Justice Kennedy, writing the decision, the dissenter said that there was no standing. And it would take a long time to explain what this means, but the point of the matter is that on both cases, the fact of the matter is that nobody defended the case at the end of the day. On DOMA, the federal government said it was no good, and then the other side, nobody would come step to the plate, so they ended up getting some Republicans in Congress to come and argue for DOMA. Okay? That didn't prevail in the federal, on the federal law, but on the state law, you ended up with the state of California didn't want to defend the ban on same-sex marriage. It was struck down by the federal court. And then what did they do? They couldn't find anybody to be in favor of the ban, so they found a couple of people who were proponents of the ballot initiative.
Right.
And that was very questionable, and the Supreme Court was unhappy about it and heard arguments on it. So as we sit right now, they're still on the DOMA case, sitting in the Supreme Court in Washington, and now they're going to go to Prop 8, but it's going to be a couple more minutes before we know the decision in that case.
And
so
maybe we'll have that while we're on the air.
Yeah, it's possible. Justice Scalia is reading his dissent, so that could be a while, but he's very, very upset about it because he does not believe that on DOMA that the court had standing. Without going through the whole discussion, the fact is nobody defended this law. This law was dead on the doorstep.
So why do you think it was enacted to begin with?
Well,
was it an appeasement at that
I
time?
think it was politics, I'm afraid.
An appeasement?
At the time, and maybe appeasement. You know, politics shifts around. And Ramon, it's very interesting to see the politics because the politics at that time is so diametrically different from the politics of today. If you look at people today and you ask them about same-sex marriage, honestly, I mean, except for certainly there are religious groups and others that are opposed to it. But generally speaking, in society, I think you get pretty much of a yawn about it, to be very candid. And the court is not sitting there divorced from society and completely, deaf to what's going on out there. They understand. Now, just in the decision, Justice Kennedy said, this law cannot withstand scrutiny under the Constitution. It's unfair. You're targeting a group of people and treating them unfairly. But what's going to be the pièce de résistance, the key to the story, is the second decision.
Yeah, the second decision.
Exactly, and that's coming down the road.
I can't
literally
wait,
as we speak.
I can't wait to hear the reaction from the extreme right as it relates to this,
Exactly.
because I'm sure that there will be a great,
Exactly.
great uproar. But let's move away from that for a
Yes.
minute, and let's talk a little bit more about the Voting Rights
Yes.
Act that I know you wanted to
Yes.
provide some
Yeah,
clarification.
I enjoyed your conversation with David. I thought it was very interesting. The one thing I wanted to add was the impact on the Bronx, because actually it was not just states that was subject to the scrutiny of the Justice Department. It was also 3 boroughs in New York: Bronx, Brooklyn, and Manhattan. And why was that? Particularly with the Bronx, because the Bronx had a literacy test years ago that was struck down. That was the key, I would say, evil that people were trying to get rid of in this scrutiny thing. Okay? Times have changed an awful lot. What you end up today with is the fact that a lot has changed. Now, maybe not enough, but a lot has changed. The question in that case is, if there is a voting rights impropriety, okay, does the federal government get to scrutinize that, get to be the overseer of what the states are doing? And incidentally, as soon as this decision came down, Texas announced, we're going through with our voter ID law. Okay? And what you ended up having is that redistricting plans, even moving a ballot box for 3 or 4 blocks in Bronx, Manhattan, Brooklyn, and these states that you mentioned, you had to go to the Justice Department and ask them for a blessing. And a lot of people felt, on federalism grounds, on state versus the federal government, that why should the federal government agency in the Justice Department be the scrutinizer of whether I can move my ballot box? If you have an issue, which is actually what's going to happen now, and you think there's a voting rights inequity, you have to go to court. Okay, so it's going to be a lot more difficult to do it, but there's still an avenue to do it, or Congress can change the law and make it more effective.
So do you think that there would be more clarity, or it might have been wiser, if you will, to separate the oversight as it relates to the types of elections, i.e. a local election versus a general election and presidential election where everybody is on the block, with the exception of those senators whose terms overlap? To allow the federal government in a general election voting for the president of the United States and the vice president to say, okay, wait a minute. As it relates to those elections, you still have to come to us.
Right. So there, I think, there's the rub, as they say in Shakespeare. That's the problem. The federal government, okay, is overseeing essentially, if you boil it down, the key to American politics is redistricting. Okay? There's a political lobbyist.
Gerrymandering.
Yeah, gerrymandering. A guy wrote a book that said, please throw away all your books, all your articles, everything, and just focus on this. It's the people in the state legislatures who are drawing those lines. And that's a fait accompli. And that's key. It doesn't make a difference if it's local, state, federal. They are the ones that determine, Ramon, the outcome of our American politics. Don't you think?
And it's determined, obviously, by the party that's in power.
That is right. If you're in power, you draw the lines. You have got the game. So the point of the matter is, it's kind of, do we want this system, or do we want to have the federal government oversee what the states are doing? Highly sensitive issue. On the other hand, the system is really broken, but like Humpty Dumpty, I don't know, how are you going to fix it? Are you going to change another system and have neutral redistricting? Very hard to do without politics, because then we're going to end up not having political parties.
Well, on the theme of politics, can I get your take on the surge, if you will, by former Congressman Anthony Weiner taking over the lead in the Democratic pool?
I'm sorry, I just want to quote Cindy Adams, the end of her column. Only in New York, kids, only in New York.
Absolutely.
Only in New York could Anthony Weiner, who basically was way down in everyone's estimation, surges to the head, 25% against 20% Quinn. It's extraordinary, but what it means is that New Yorkers, and we are New Yorkers, we are special people. We are forgiving, and we are willing to give someone another chance. And I think That's very commendable. That's why I have to say New York is the greatest city in the world.
I mean, I know it's a poor comparison, but Washington, D.C. folks took similar action with Marion Barry, you know, who convicted and everything else and reelected him.
Right,
you know, so
exactly. It doesn't always work, but that's American politics.
It is. And quickly then, Edward Snowden. Is he in Russia? Is he not in Russia?
Right.
Is he a traitor? Is he really guilty of treason?
Right.
What is your take
Right.
on
He's
that?
living apparently, or he's at the terminal in the airport, and that reminded me.
Tom Hanks, right?
That just reminded me of the Tom Hanks movie. And I was tweeting this morning they should live at the terminal.
Yeah,
okay,
well.
because Putin said, hey, if you're in my airport, then you don't need a visa, and you can get a ticket anywhere you want. And by the way, we don't have an extradition agreement with you. And if you say otherwise, it's a lot of ravings and rubbish, which proves the point that the United States of America, the most powerful nation in the world, cannot dislodge a guy who I read actually had access to President Obama's telephone.
By his own admission.
By his own admission.
By his own admission,
I mean, it's extraordinary that we cannot, it's kind of like the Where's Waldo of international politics, that we cannot find this guy. I think he's going to end up in Ecuador, because Ecuador is the place of choice. Julian Assange, WikiLeakers, whistleblowers. Ecuador wants to point a finger at the United States and say, we can show you.
I'll end with this. There was an old commercial, an old oil commercial that the tagline was, we're going to get you.
Gotcha.
We're going to get you. And I think the United States will get him wherever he might go eventually. And anyway, Mark, thank you so much for being with us as always. It's good to see you, and thanks for your insight.
It was a pleasure.
Okay,
Thank
and
you.
we have to take a quick break now, but coming up, we'll hear about how you can stay safe and have fun this summer. We'll be right back.
This is so cool, Dad. Awesome. This is so cool, Dad.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of siblings in foster care who'll take you just as you are.
How you doing?
Hi.
Hi. Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks.
If only child abuse were this easy to recognize. If you even suspect abuse, call 1-800-4-A-CHILD. All calls are anonymous and confidential. Trust your instincts.
Ramon Rodriguez. With the weather getting warmer, there will be an increase in outdoor activities taking place. Our next guests are here to tell us how we can enjoy the season and keep our children safe. We are pleased to be joined by administrative nurse at the Children's Hospital at Montefiore, Laura Holohan, and nurse practitioner Sarah Wren. Ladies, welcome to the show, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
To discuss actually some very important and sensitive topics to everyone, as we now have entered the summer season with a bang, I might add, since we're in the third day of 90-plus degree weather, which, as I understand, meteorologically constitutes a heat wave, the second one, and the first within the actual summertime. But okay, so talking about heat waves, obviously generated by the sun, tell us a little bit about some of the things that we should do to protect ourselves from those very dangerous UV rays.
Should really put sunblock on with an SPF of 30 or higher, and it should be applied every 2 to 3 hours, and more frequently if you've been in the water.
Okay.
And you should really wear a hat and some sunglasses.
So those items, the combination of those are certainly helpful in protecting us from the rays. Now, as I understand it, the SPF, the sun protective factor, thank you, is to go above 50 is really diminishing returns in terms of the protection that it offers. So I know you said SPF 30 or higher, but to go again above 50 is
Not
you're going to pay more
necessary.
for something that's not really going to give you any real additional protection. Is that a fact?
True. Correct. And ideally, we recommend keeping children, especially young infants, out of the sun. Keep them in the shade, protect them from the sun, rather than just only putting sunscreen on.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, because I know that I've heard in the as I was growing up and still hearing it today, that while you might keep a child away from the sun, under perhaps the canopy of the carriage or with a floppy hat on or something, that actually even in the shade, if you don't offer the proper protection, you still can get the sun's rays.
Absolutely.
So that's something, excuse me, that I wanted to point out, just in case any of our viewers feel as though, well, the baby's under the shade, under a big tree, etc., he or she is fine. Take the necessary precautions anyway.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the things that occurs, of course, in the summer predominantly, not of course throughout the year, but since we're talking about the sun and the weather and its impact, is outdoor activities. And one of those outdoor activities, of course, is biking. Now, especially throughout the city with all of the bike lanes that there are, with city banks, flooding the city with about 250,000 bikes that one can rent almost on every corner of New York City. What can you offer our viewers as it relates to bike safety?
That's a great question. While we love children to bike, it's a great way to stay healthy, stay active. It's really important to do it safely. And we, in the summer, in the emergency department, we see an increased number of injuries from bikes.
Such as?
So most of the injuries we see are related to falls. So they can be minor scrapes and bruises. They can be severe fractures. And the biggest, most serious injury that we see is head trauma.
Yeah.
And the thing about head trauma is it is usually preventable if you wear a safe, well-fitting bike helmet. And it's not only just a recommendation that children wear bike helmets, it's actually the law that all children under 14 wear a bike helmet.
Under 14?
Under 14
So
by
adults
law.
are not obligated to
Not
wear?
by law. We recommend everyone wear a
Oh,
bike
I see.
helmet. Absolutely everyone should wear a bike helmet, but it is law, and actually parents can get fined if their children are biking without a helmet.
Oh, it's interesting. I was under the impression that the bicycle helmet requirement was blanket across the
No,
board,
it's
adults and
actually,
children.
in New York City, it's just required for children 14 and under.
But it would
And-
seem logical, right,
Not
to wear
everybody
one?
Right, it does seem logical. And that also goes for skateboarding and inline skating. We see head trauma from that. So they should be wearing protective gear, wrist guards, elbow guards, knee guards, and bike helmets as well.
It's almost kind of like a motorcyclist,
Yes,
right? With
exactly.
all of the pads that are recommended
Right.
for them to wear as well.
Exactly. And New York City actually has some giveaway events with bike helmets. There was one recently, they gave away 500 free bike helmets. But they periodically have these events. People can go online to 311 and find out more information. And it's really important that the bike helmet fits properly. Snugly,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
not too tight. They should be able to put 2 fingers underneath the strap and make sure the strap is connected.
Connected, right. Tell me, just out of curiosity, what is your take on the introduction, of course, of all these bike lanes that Mayor Bloomberg has instituted throughout the city? Do you think that they are beneficial? Do you think that they pose a greater danger than they might ordinarily, if they weren't bike lanes? What's your take on it,
Well,
just out of curiosity?
People on bikes really need to follow all the rules of the streets as well. But biking injuries occur on the sidewalk, they occur in parks, they can occur in driveways, they occur everywhere, not just in the streets. So I'm not personally a huge fan of having, as a driver, having bike riders nearby, but I think it is what it is, and everybody just has to be really careful, both the bikers and the drivers.
And share the road.
Share the road, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about another topic that in some ways is more imminently dangerous than the sun rays. And I say that not because the sun rays are not, but those have a longer effect, and they may not manifest themselves immediately, other than obviously sunburn or a heat stroke. But let's talk about bug bites and the kind of bugs that we all, in particular children, can be exposed to during the summer months. Let's say bees, wasps. What should be the immediate reaction of parents if a child is stung by a bee or a wasp? What should they do?
Most of the,
She was going to talk about bugs.
most of the time with bug bites, it's really more of a nuisance than anything else, and everyone should always just wash with soap and water. We do see significant, commonly see kids come to the emergency department for bug-related events. Sometimes it's just the itching, the discomfort, but bee stings can cause anaphylaxis, allergic reactions in a small amount of people. Mosquitoes can cause mosquito-borne illnesses like West Nile we hear about, and tick bites are more common in the summer also, and that transmits Lyme disease and other tick-borne infections. So it's really kids are going to go outdoors, adults are going to go outdoors, but we do recommend bug repellent when children are playing outdoors, anything of 10 to 30% DEET.
You know, I'd like to zero in for a moment on the Lyme disease and the actual little bug that causes it. I know it's very, very small. It's got a bunch of little feet, and it's very dark in color. But what I'd like to focus on is the symptoms that manifest themselves when you have been bitten by that bug and basically contracted that Lyme disease. Symptoms that perhaps parents, and maybe in our community specifically, are not very aware of and may dismiss it as something not very important. Because as you both know, Lyme disease can be very, very dangerous and very debilitating. So talk about fatigue that it causes, fever, rashes, I think maybe even some disorientation. It may even cause somewhat of a Bell's palsy effect on the face, the hardening, right, of the face, or the what should parents do when they see these things?
So if a child is in a tick-borne area, playing in the woods, camping, one thing that's important to do is when they come home in the evening, undress and inspect them. The deer ticks are very, very tiny. They're much smaller than a dog tick, so they really have to be inspected closely. And if the ticks are on the body, they should be removed. But because they're so tiny, many often nobody sees the tick bite. But at the site of the bite, there may be a rash called ECM, which is a bullseye rash, and it gets bigger and bigger, and that occurs about 5 to 21 days after the bite. If you're lucky and you get that rash, because that makes the diagnosis of Lyme disease easier if you see this very classic rash. But the nonspecific signs of Lyme disease are viral signs: headache, fever, body aches, So the specific signs of Lyme disease are very similar to other viruses.
I see. But the telltale sign, of course, would be
The rash,
the
right,
rash.
right. And there are long-term complications, which hopefully we prevent by picking it up earlier.
So if they don't see the rash, it makes it a little more difficult to
Exactly.
identify the particular, disease that they may have contracted by a bug or a tick of some kind.
A tick, yeah.
And any final thoughts that you might offer for additional safety tips for the community as far as swimming, the dangers of the waters, etc.
Yes, I want to talk a little bit about water safety. Tomorrow,
Okay.
New York City's pools open for
Okay.
throughout the city, and really the best thing that you can do for your child is teach them to swim. They should never be left unattended in the water, even with floaty devices. And New York City offers free swim lessons to children of all ages throughout July and August. You can
Okay.
find out that information from New York City Parks and Recreation or on calling 311. But really, to teach kids to swim is the best gift you can give them for the summer.
That's a beautiful thought, and it's true that some parents, I think, are misled, not intentionally, but just feel a false sense of security where they have some floating devices or these little floaters, these tubes that kids can hang on to, and
And that they
Right.
think
that's
of
not enough.
lifeguards on
And,
duty.
and one
But-
thing else, Laura, you should mention about fireworks.
Yeah, the
You wanted to.
fireworks, right. I want to talk a little bit about fireworks too, since 4th of July is coming. That we see a lot of injuries in the emergency department, burns and amputations from explosive devices.
Right.
So fireworks are great to watch. People should watch the Macy's fireworks, but really keep children away from fireworks.
And let the professionals handle that.
Correct, right.
Absolutely. Ladies, thank you so much for the information and the insight you've provided. I hope it has been helpful to our viewers and help prevent some of these consequences that might occur during these next 2 or 3 months. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being with us.
For having us.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
You bet. Well, we have to take a quick break now, but we'll be right back, so I ask you to stay tuned. Yeah, it's interesting because my daughter
Hi, I'm Ruben Diaz Jr. I'm not just the Bronx Borough President, but I'm a father and an uncle. I can't emphasize enough how important it is for men and fathers to be a part of their children's lives. Let me talk to you about a program that's come out of my office, the Bronx Fathers Taking Action Committee, which is a committee of Bronx fathers and men formed to help uplift the institution of fatherhood while responsibly respecting the privilege of being a dad. Our mission statement is to engage, empower, educate, and encourage fathers, grandfathers, and uncles of all ages by providing them with the resources and help that they need in order to build new relationships with the leaders in our community. Ultimately, this initiative will help reinforce Bronx men as positive role models. So, I just want to take the time out to encourage fathers, grandfathers, uncles, men of all corners of the Bronx to take an important role in the lives of the children in your family and in our community, and also to get involved in this uplifting committee.
Good job, Theo.
Thank you.
Let's start it again, Theo.
All right.
Separate raw meats from other foods by using different cutting boards. 3,000 Americans will die from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
How you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks.
If only child abuse were this easy to recognize. If you even suspect abuse, call 1-800-4-A-CHILD. All calls are anonymous and confidential. Trust your instincts.
Well, welcome back to Open. I'm your host, Ramon Rodriguez. The Urban Homesteading Assistance Board works to ensure that homes in the community are affordable and give a voice to the members of the community in cleaning up their neighborhoods. Today we are joined by Director Kerry White, who directs the Organizing and Policy Department, to talk to us about the kind of work that they do in the community. And Kerry, thank you for being with us and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You know, the Urban Homesteading Assistance Board. Interesting name. So tell us, first of all, what's your basic philosophy, or the basic philosophy of this organization?
Well, the basic philosophy is to give people, residents, a choice in their homes. And we do this several ways. Most of the organization, what it started at 40 years ago, it's actually our 40th anniversary this year, and most of the organization works to help people form cooperative housing, limited equity, low-income co-ops throughout the city. They started helping squatters take over their homes and continue to help develop co-ops and help support co-ops. Also, what I do, I work in the Organizing and Policy Department, and we work with more rental housing to help people have a voice in their homes. And we believe that residents should be decision makers in the places they live in.
Now, as far as renters are concerned, when you indicate that you work with renters, how do you select the renters that you work with, or do they select you?
It happens both ways. We do get calls sometimes from tenants who've heard from other people that they know in the communities, or who've seen stuff we've done and ask us to come out and help them organize and form tenants associations. But most of what we do, we do policy type organizing. We try to find trends in housing and try to work in buildings that are affected by bigger issues, so that when we organize with these buildings, we can try to have a bigger impact on the community. We can help these buildings have a voice in explaining what's going on in their community and in their homes, and try to use that to impact other buildings that are having the same problems.
So does the status of these renters that you work with through your assistance, your organization's assistance, eventually convert to ownership?
A lot of the buildings we work with, yes. Most of the buildings that UHAB works with do become co-ops. But a lot of the buildings that our department works with, it's not necessarily the case. We try more to just organize tenants to help form tenants associations so tenants can help make decisions on what's going on in their homes. A lot of the buildings we work with, particularly right now, we're focusing on the foreclosure crisis that's hitting multifamily buildings throughout the city.
Okay.
So a lot of those buildings, we're just trying to help tenants deal with the problems that is affecting their buildings through the foreclosure, and to have a choice in the decision-making process of what the eventual outcome will be. Not all tenants want to be co-ops. Not all residents want to be co-ops.
Right.
So tenants should have a voice in their homes. So we try to help that happen if we can, and help the tenants realize what their outcomes would be.
So when these tenants who decide that want to be co-op owners, do you help them through the legal process of establishing a corporation, to establish the cooperative board, you know, a cooperative agreement, and the shares that they're going to buy, what they're going to get?
Yeah, UHAB does that a lot. UHAB has a lot of trainings to help residents become owners, home ownership classes. They help, teach people how to do bookkeeping and all of the, how to make the bylaws and all of the technical assistance that needs to go into forming a co-op. Like I said, that's not really what I do, but we do have a legal department, and we do help, when people are going through the process of converting to co-op. We help with that process and help the people, make that transformation, because it's a pretty significant transformation from renter to homeowner. So there is a lot of that support at UHAB.
And I know that your offices are based in Manhattan, but that you do work throughout the other boroughs.
We're a citywide organization, so we do work throughout the city. There's co-ops all over the city, in the Bronx and Brooklyn, everywhere. And our department as well, the organizing department, we work with renters in the Bronx, we work with people in Queens and Brooklyn and Upper Manhattan. So we really do work throughout the city.
By chance, are you finding that there is some kind of upswing, perhaps, in the Bronx specifically, that is attracting renters to want to convert to a co-op type of an operation?
I think there is a lot of people throughout the city who find it, co-ops appealing. To be a homeowner is appealing, and I think there are co-ops, all over. When we work with, when I work with distressed buildings, which is what I primarily work with, so we work in buildings that are in very, very bad condition and trying to help people make decisions about what's going on, have an influence on what's going on in their homes. A lot of people who are going through that process decide that they could do it better, that they have been kind of the victim of landlords who care about making money, who don't care about taking care of the building, and if they were more involved in the building, they would do it better. So I think that's...
So you help in some way to democratize the control of the building.
Right. I mean, and that's what we want to do. People who live, particularly in the Bronx and in areas of Brooklyn, most of these residents have lived in these communities for a very long time and lived in these buildings for a very long time. They have very intricate knowledge of what goes on in the building, what the problems are, and any responsible, even in a rental building, any responsible landlord would benefit from listening closer to the tenants.
Unfortunately, that doesn't happen all the time, which is what results in the kind of problems that obviously your organization deals with. Are there any other projects that you might be working on that you might want to share with our audience?
Well, I guess the most interesting thing that we're probably seeing right now, and it's interesting in a kind of upsetting way, is that the housing bubble that came in the mid-2000s that have led to this problem that we're in now. Unfortunately, we're seeing an uptick in that happening again. In a lot of the buildings that we're seeing go through foreclosure, going through these problems, speculation is back. There's a lot of people out there trying to profit again on communities in the Bronx and Brooklyn and throughout the city that are still making the same assumptions that the landlords before made, which are, hoping for gentrification, hoping to push people out. And so
it's back.
Yes, it is back. And the most important thing that residents can do is organize.
And thank you for leading them in that direction. And thank you for being with us, Carrie. And I wish you continued success in all of your efforts in this very important segment of our life.
Thank you.
Okay. And as always, it's been a pleasure coming into your homes today. And I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and for you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the recablecast at 10 p.m. this evening on Cablevision Channel 67, FiOS Channel 33, or watch anytime on the web. Have a great week, and don't forget to keep your heart and your mind, and most of all, this channel, wide open. Thank you for being with us.